Ayes 105, noes 15. Clause 6 will stand part. The question now is that Clause 7 stand part. Honourable Trevor Malahat.
Mr. Chairman, this sort of looks like a relatively minor clause, but it does in fact repeal an entire act which is quite extensive and runs through. Just looking at this relatively carefully, about 20 pages of statute. So while this is a tiny couple of lines, it is something which takes out an entire act, and I want a level of assurance that this is necessary, and that the financing and commitment arrangements, which are in the 1975 Act, have in fact been picked up somewhere else in the legislation. Because I've had a quick look through this bill, Mr. Chairman, and I cannot see where the financing commitments, which are in Article 7 of the schedule of the 1975 legislation, which we're currently repealing, where the fund can use calls on members to provide individual commitments in the form of their option of direct financing or individual undertaking for borrowing by the fund, or calls on members to provide collective undertaking for borrowing by the fund. Now, I cannot see where that core that core method of financing methodology is picked up and replicated elsewhere in the legislation. Now, of course, I didn't sit on the Select Committee, and I'm not entirely familiar with it. I'm pretty sure that members opposite did, and I'd be happy for them to explain where in the legislation that we are currently contemplating that in fact does occur. The next question goes to the issue of prepayments, which were previously in Section 4 of Article 5 of the 1975 legislation. And the question I have of the Minister, and colleagues can continue to ask it, is how are prepayments treated now in the legislation? Are they treated differently? Are they treated the same as they were in the 1975 legislation? And if there is a change, where are prepayments picked up in this area? Because I'm unable to see. It might be that there's been a decision not to have prepayments anymore. It might be that everyone is so cash-strapped that they pay on the due date, and there is not a prepayment arrangement or an allowance for that. But if there is a system change, then I think it is important. Section 2 of Article 5 of the 1975 legislation also goes to the eligibility for loans, and a member requests a loan from the fund has to make it clear to the governing committee that it is encountering serious external financial difficulties. That's many countries in the world at the moment, has made the fullest appropriate use of its reserves, and has made best efforts to obtain capital on reasonable terms from other sources, and has made the fullest use of other multilateral facilities. Now, that is a pretty important set of conditions, Mr. Chairman. And again, as with the question of prepayments, I asked the Minister, and he can clear it up pretty quickly, to indicate where this 1975, where the 1975 rules are replicated, or whether we are in fact transferring to the IMF itself, to the governing board or to the executive board, a set of powers which they don't currently have, and having something which is less regulated. Now, again, if that is the case, I would like like to know. That could be a very good reason for my colleagues voting against the legislation. And I see eyebrows going up and someone else shaking their head, so I can't quite work out amongst my Green colleagues what the story is and what the reason, I presume, Mr Chairman.
Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Chairman, I'm trying to work out what the reason is for them voting against. Mr Chairman, I'm sure my colleague, the Honourable Leanne Dalzell, will want to look even more carefully at the 1975 legislation, which is being repealed. I think my understanding is that this was legislation that was put through the House by the Honourable Bob Tizzo, one of the longer-serving members of Parliament, although not necessarily the longest-serving minister. In fact, he was a member of Parliament during quite an unfortunate period of the, from our perspective, not quite as unfortunate as Bill Rowling, who I think was a member for 24 years, of which only 3 years was in government. That was not a good time for the Labor Party. Bob, sorry. Bill Rowling was a good member of Parliament. He in fact launched a very good campaign in Hamilton West, a successful campaign against Mike Minogue, who at that stage I think was running 4% of preferred Prime Minister, and he lost. Sort of as one of the indications that personal popularity, especially under a first past the post system, didn't guarantee very much at all. But the point that I'm making is that this is legislation which appears to have stood the test of time for the last 38 years, and what I would ask of the government is whether the 1975 Amendment Act is being replicated elsewhere by this legislation, or whether this is just a gross and irresponsible transfer of power within the IMF.
Honourable Leanne Dalzell.
My colleague, the Honourable Trevor Mallard, has raised a number of points, but he made a point earlier on